At 6 p.m. Need a motion for adoption of minutes.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of Council held at City Hall on Monday, June 12th, 2017 be adopted as circulated.
Moved by Councillor Budds and seconded by Councillor Draycott. All those in favor? And that's carried. Before we move into delegations, I just want to acknowledge our very own Prairie Métis Steppers who went to Ottawa for a performance last week on National Aboriginal Day on the 21st, and they performed for the Prime Minister. They had a ringside seat. History was being made, and one of their members, Kelsey McLennan, presented the Prime Minister with a Métis sash from Manitoba. So to them and their coach, Leanne McLennan, we just want to recognize what they did last week. Now, we do have one delegation this evening from the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. And the podium is yours, and we have 10 minutes for delegations.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Good day, and thank you for having me. My name is Giselle Lissaway, and I'm here with Rosemary Holtman and Nicole Wenzel, fellow members, on behalf of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. May we offer our many thanks to the representatives of the City of Portage la Prairie for the opportunity to address the topic of expanding services and protecting our public post offices. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers would like to thank the Mayor and Councils of the City of Portage la Prairie for their continued support of the Post Office and the service it provides. As you may know, in October of 2015, the then newly elected federal government placed an immediate moratorium on the fast-paced conversion to the self-serve delivery model, also known as community mailboxes, which protected your city from the scheduled elimination of door-to-door delivery services. The federal government then determined that a review of the post office would take place. A standing committee was created to review the post office. 10 MPs were appointed to the standing committee from all three major political parties. The standing committee then spent several months traveling the country and enlisting feedback from such groups as city councils, town administrators, rural municipalities, community groups, small and large businesses, seniors groups, and the Council for Canadians with Disabilities. Now, during those public consultations, the Council of Canadians with Disabilities, or CCD, told the Parliamentary Committee that the end of door-to-door delivery would adversely affect Canadians living with disabilities. Now, the CCD is a national human rights organization of people with disabilities working for an inclusive and accessible Canada. It said that ending home delivery would make a service that is currently accessible less accessible to persons living with disabilities, noting that Canada made a commitment not to do anything that would reduce accessibility services when it ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Now, during the review phase of the Standing Committee, results of polls conducted by Strathcom consulting firm were released. Now, those polls concluded that 21.3% of respondents reported experiencing an accident, such as a slip or fall, either at a community mailbox or going to and from the community mailbox. 8.5% of this group required medical attention. Now, we know that these high rates of injuries have now prompted further studies. Such studies are currently underway at the universities of Saskatchewan, Waterloo, and Carleton. The U of S Study and Research has released some findings in a document titled Community Mailboxes, a New Falls Risk. The investigators of this study are researching the falls among people attending the emergency department at Wingmore Regional Hospital in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. Their aim is to explore the number and the impact of falls associated with the retrieval of mail from community mailboxes. Another recent study done by Angus Reid found that Canadians are near unanimous in their dislike of the idea of closing rural post offices, with results of 89% opposed to the suggestion. They also found out that 55% of Canadians are against eliminating door-to-door mail delivery, while 81% of those polled worried that losing home mail delivery would pose a real hardship for many people. These details were included as part of the standing committee hearings, and after thorough consideration was given to the testimonies of participants involved in those hearings. Now, the results and recommendations of the Standing Committee on Government Operations released its report. A summary was given to you, to the Mayor and Council for review. This report is titled The Way Forward. Now, among the report are 45 recommendations of the committee. I would like to draw your attention to recommendation number 23, in which the committee calls for Canada Post to continue the moratorium on community mailbox conversions and develop a plan to reinstate door-to-door delivery for communities that were converted after the 3rd of August 2015. The committee also calls for a continued moratorium on post office closures. In its conclusion, the Standing Committee stated, Canada Post is an essential public service that Canadians across the country rely on to communicate with each other and with various levels of government. The committee believes that by implementing the recommendations outlined in this report, Canada Post will be better able to meet the needs and expectations of Canadians. Now, since the Standing Committee has called for a continued suspension on the conversion of door-to-door delivery and given direction to the federal government to reinstate delivery to those communities that lost it post-August 3rd, 2015, we are calling on the City of Portage la Prairie to urge Minister Foote to include its city and the desires of many of its 12,949 residents in over 5,255 homes among those whose services should be maintained. The City of Portage la Prairie is currently number 827 on the moratorium list, which was last updated in 2007. Previous to that, it had been updated in 1994. Now, this moratorium list protects communities from potential closures and service reductions. Now, it's important for the City administration to understand that there is not an automatic appointment of the previous list to the soon-to-be-released list updated. For this reason, we have found that countless cities, towns, and municipalities have advocated on municipal levels, urging the minister responsible to accept the recommendations of the Standing Committee. Additionally, the Standing Committee made recommendations which calls for Canada Post to review the impact on efficiency of delivery before implementing strategies. An example of this is local processing versus centralized processing. Now, currently, all mail that originates in Portage and destined for Portage is shipped to Winnipeg for processing prior to being shipped back to Portage for delivery. This causes delays in the processing and delivery of the mail and often results in the obligations of the Canada Post Service Charter not being met. Currently, the turnaround time is to be no more than 2 working days. We'd like to thank Council for the opportunity to address these issues, and we acknowledge that this matter is a decision to be made on a federal level. However, we must be optimistic that much consideration will be given to opinions of selected leadership at municipal levels. So, on behalf of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers and the vast majority of your constituents in the City of Portage la Prairie, I would ask that Council move a motion to send a resolution to Minister Judy Foote calling for the federal government to accept the recommendations of the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. Thank you for your time, and I'm open to any comments.
Thank you very much. Were there any questions from Council? Councillor Wall.
I believe when you spoke to us previously, there was talk of expanding services as there is in this report, but
yes.
At that time, I think you were talking about banking in rural post offices and so on. This report doesn't really specify what type of additional services. Do you have any idea what those might be?
Absolutely. We are quite excited to maintain these post offices because then it enables us to be able to continue to offer a wide variety of expansion services. So we'd be looking at things like electrical generating, power stations, as well as postal banking, most definitely. Perhaps having check-in services for seniors would be vital and a real asset to the community as well. There are just so many potential services. Internet, broadband, things like that for some of your rural as well would be very helpful. There are many, many, many things that we're exploring.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions from council? Well, thank you very much for coming out this evening and sharing this information with us, and we'll take your request under consideration.
Thank you. And what is the general procedure for a reply, or what can we
You would hear
anticipate?
back from us after July the 10th.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to open the hearing for 3217.
Before we do that, I'd like to declare a conflict and excuse myself from council, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. You're excused. Councillor Wall, we'll open the variation hearing for PC 32-17. This is Buds at 48 Caithness. Is there anyone here to speak to the hearing? Need a motion to close the hearing?
Resolved that the public hearing for variation PC 32-17, Buds at 408 Caithness Street, now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Wall and seconded by Councillor Draycott. All those in favor? And that's carried.
Brent and Jody Buds are applying for a variation in order to allow the required driveway access of 6 meters to be increased to 9.45 meters. A site visit to the area reveals that 37 surrounding houses on the street, 6 of them have driveway widths that range from approximately 7 meters to 9 meters. 10 of the properties have joined driveways that range approximately 10.3 to 18.2 meters. The remaining 18 properties either have no driveways or driveway widths that fall within the zoning bylaw requirement. This building is in an R1 60-foot residential single-family zone. The application has been circulated to the various city departments with no concerns. Public notices have been sent out to all property owners within a 100-meter radius. The recommendation is, and I so move, that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the variation request of Brent and Jody Buds to vary the required maximum driveway access of 6 meters to be increased to 9.45 meters at the property known as 408 Caithness Street, which is legally described as Lot 13, Plan 1974, Parish of Portage la Prairie.
Moved by Councillor Wall and seconded by Councillor Draycott. Any comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Okay, we're going to move into Finance, Legislative, and Property Committee. Councillor Buds, please.
Your committee has nothing to report at this council meeting.
Thank you. City Planning and Economic Development, tonight Councillor Wall.
Actually,
Oh, sorry, Councillor
yeah,
Buds.
So there's one item for council's consideration here and approval, and that is the application for subdivision for lots 16 and 19, block 24, plan 30. And so obviously we know what our alternatives are. So subdivision has been completed by Gordon and Marlene Ritchie. So they're requesting to subdivide almost 4,000 square feet from the approximate 10,500 square foot lot for residential purposes. It will be serviced by municipal sewer and piped water and is accessed off a municipal road. Community and regional planning have conditionally approved this, subject to our approval, and this has already gone through the planning district as well. So It is a recommendation of your committee, and I so move, that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the subdivision of lots 16 and 19, Block 24, Plan 30, PLTO in River Lot 68, Parish of Portage la Prairie, and to form 2 new lots of dimensions 63 feet by 107.25 feet and 36 feet by 107.25 feet.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Wall. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
Sorry, and that concludes that report.
Thank you, Councillor Buds. Community Services Committee, Councillor Fraze, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Community Service Committee is nothing for tonight.
Thank you. Waterworks Committee, Councillor Wall.
Yes, Your Worship. This evening we are going to award tender number 170PS022 for the disposal of lime sludge and waste residuals for the City of Portage la Prairie Water Treatment Plant. The tender was advertised on the City of Portage la Prairie website and on the MERC's website. 12 packages were issued, with only 4 returned. The tender opening was Thursday, June 1st, 2017. The following tender bids were received. Terravita Corporation, $961,440. Messett Construction, $1,028,160. EF Moon Construction, $1,049,760. And Assiniboine Injections Limited, $1,420,650. The work involves the loading, transportation, and final disposal of an estimated 48,000 tons of lime softening residuals and other water treatment residuals from the water treatment plant's solid settling pond. The dry residual waste material is likely greater than 90% calcium carbonate, with a small fraction of organic matter and very small fractions of aluminum and iron coagulant compounds. The contractor is required to provide all equipment and personnel to load, transport, and dispose of the lime sludge and waste residuals while ensuring the disposal of the lime sludge and waste residuals conforms to provincial or federal rules, regulations, and/or guidelines. The work must be completed by November 3rd, 2017. Previous years, with a permit from Manitoba Conservation, the lime sludge was taken to farmland to provide pH adjustment. However, when we applied for a permit earlier this year, Manitoba Sustainable Development advised an environmental application with environmental impact assessment would be required. There was not enough time to conduct this assessment since we must have the material removed this year and the pond ready for filling later this year. Therefore, the material is being taken to the Portage la Prairie Regional Landfill. There are no tipping fees being charged due to the fact that this material will be used as cover material. The unit price bids were based on an estimate quantity of 48,000 tons of lime sludge. This quantity could vary and the overall cost could vary accordingly. The low bidder with the GST removed is Terravita Corporation at $961,440. The total project cost is within the budgeted amount of $1.5 million for sludge removal for 2017, which is budgeted to come from the utility reserve. The recommendation is, and I so move, that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie award the contract for the disposal of lime sludge and waste residuals as specified in tender 170PS022 to Terravita Corporation for the tendered price of $1,009,512, including GST.
Moved by Councillor Wall and seconded by Councillor Fraze. Any questions or comments on the motion?
Just a question. Is it the intent of the utilities to look for a permit for the following year to continue putting or resume putting that lime sludge on farmland?
I'll defer to Mr. Brayton.
We will be looking at alternative methods of disposal of this material. It probably won't happen for the next disposal is probably 3 years down the road yet.
I see. Thank you.
Any other questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Is there anything further on Waterworks Committee, Councillor Wall?
No, Your Worship, there's not.
Thank you. Transportation Committee, Councillor Draycott?
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing this evening for transportation.
And Public Safety Committee, Councillor Fraze?
Thank you, Your Worship. There's nothing for Public Safety Committee tonight.
We have no deferred business. We do have some new business, and this is Finance. Councillor Buds, please.
Thank you. 2 items. The first one is a sale of city-owned property to Hudson Ventures. This report comes to us from PRED. So our options are to approve an offer, to counter the offer, or reject an offer. And so we do have a developer by the name of Hudson Ventures proposing a $2.8 million investment in the development of 2 14-unit buildings to create 28 residential suites on the parcel. They're proposing to purchase a portion of the existing roadway amounting to approximately 6 meters by 161 meters. And there is a sketch that's attached to your report, and that for the total sum of $21,780.54 plus taxes and fees. Whenever we involve a roadway, as you know, ministerial approval is required to close and sell a public roadway. And the pricing has been determined by precedent of a similar sale of property by the city in 2007. So we've done this before. We have established the precedents. So circulation to department heads has revealed that the proponent would need to accommodate parking needs, which has been addressed in the proposed design, previously discussed and shared with the planning district and the city manager. The dimensions identified in this offer reflect recognition of the required distances from underground infrastructure. So we do have some infrastructure that I believe runs north and south along there, and that's been addressed in this as well. It should be noted that this was already approved and reviewed by the PRED board, and now it is now coming forth for council's approval. So with that in mind, it is a recommendation of the committee, and I so move that the council approve the sale of the identified 10,009 square foot parcel currently classified as a roadway on the western shoulder of 18th Street Northwest between Gigot and a public lane to Hudson Ventures for a sum of $21,780.54 plus taxes and all costs associated with the sale, subject to receiving ministerial approval of the road closure bylaw.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Fraze. Any questions or comments on the motion? Just one question, Councillor Buds. Did they indicate construction times?
I will defer to Vern. I do not believe they indicated timeline, but I'll just ask Mr. May.
Not at this time.
Okay. Any other questions? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. And the second piece of new business is also, Councillor Buds.
Not new, but new because it is the finalization of our 2016 financial statements. So we did receive those, and tonight we're to review and approve those audited financial statements. So as you know, the Municipal Act requires that audited municipalities' financial statements be reviewed at the first regular meeting of council after we receive those statements. And so we did receive them on June 23rd. Once the 2016 statements are approved, they go from draft to an approved status. They're signed by the mayor and probably likely myself, and our auditors will then file the 2016 financial statements with the province of Manitoba and other parties, Department of Indigenous and Municipal Affairs, by June 30th as required. So we are within our timelines, and we will meet those. In Manitoba, audited financial statements for municipalities are prepared under the principles of PSAB, which is Public Sector Accounting Board, while municipalities are required to prepare their financial plans using cash accounting practices. So what that means is we ignore amortization of tangible assets over their useful life, which is a normal common practice. That also ignores intertransfers within the municipality's reserves and the impact of interest expense, such as interest for outstanding debentures. So those things are kind of taken out of the equation and used in the cash method. So Schedule 10 on page 37, if you were reviewing that, would kind of outline those types of items. Another area which draws some attention when you're reading our statements is Schedule 17 on page 45, which identifies the net results of the city's financial results totaling a net surplus of $2.27 million. of which $522,000 resulted from general operations and $1.7 million resulted from utility operations using cash accounting practices. So if it that is just what I was speaking to, and not taking into consideration, we'll say amortization for those types of projects, boosts this number. It's important to note that the financial plan must be used in order to calculate property taxes, as we know, and details of the calculation of the 2016 mill rate included education taxes collected on behalf of the Portage la Prairie School Division. And as you know, we collect them and remit them to the province on behalf of the school division. Also, an item of note, I think everybody understands this, but these are consolidated financial statements, so they include Portage Handyvan, Portage la Prairie Planning District, Portage la Prairie Regional Landfill Authority, Portage la Prairie Regional Library, Portage Regional Recreation Authority, and Central Plains Incorporated, commonly known as PRED. The net financial result of these entities is detailed in another schedule on page 27. We've talked a lot about the investment in our infrastructure and tangible assets, and this statement, as noted in Schedule 1 on page 21, has $6.3 million in new tangible assets that were added in 2016, but that is mostly in our water and sewer infrastructure, and I think, as you guys all know, we can continue to see that trend moving forward. So, the city contracted an independent auditors, obviously, Myers Norris Penny, and they're available to explain the financial statements in further at our council's request, if that's so required. And as always, these are in draft format, and as after they're approved, we will obviously give the final version available for viewing here at City Hall and published on our public website for, once the auditors release the final version that the mayor and appointed councillor have signed. So that's common practice and something that we've done shortly thereafter our approval. So this is basically from my desk, or my seat, I should say, is confirmation of the internal process that we have. I did speak with the auditor myself as well and indicated a very solid audit once again, and this is obviously a true representation of our 2016 fiscal year. So with that in mind, it is my recommendation I move that the council at City of Portage la Prairie approve the audited financial statements for the 12 months ended December 31st, 2016.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Wall. Comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. That concludes our new business. We have no old business. And we are adjourned at 6:27 p.m. and we're going to move right into committee. And we'll call committee to order at 6:28 p.m. And first up is Finance Legislative Property Committee. Councillor Buds.
I'll have nothing to report unless there's new business at our next council meeting from Finance.
Thank you. City Planning and Economic Development.
Yes, I'll take that one as well. And there's a report from our planning district just outlining a summary for 2017 versus 2016 and for individually the month of May. You know, I look, sitting on this board, I tend to look not necessarily on the month, but maybe a little bit more of year to date to kind of give the same type of trend. You can see that if you look at 2017 and 2016, currently we are on pace. You look at the bottom line, basically, of all the different areas. We have residential, commercial, industrial, institutional, farm buildings, and then a lot of miscellaneous. But at the end of the day, we are at 124 permits in 2017 for a total value of $14,286,000 versus during the same period of time last year of 106 permits for slightly less dollars. This points to, and we've discussed at the planning district, that there seems to be a bit more activity. Maybe it's not as many large dollar projects as there were last year, but really the differences are not significant in nature. The good news is there's more activity. So, and as you know, with recent announcements of many things going on, we look at this trend continuing as well. The trend is our friend, let's hope. If there's no other comments, that does conclude my my report from planning, or from economic development, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Buds. Community Service Committee, Councillor Fraze, please.
Thank you, Worship. One item on the agenda for tonight is a presentation of our Parks Development Master Plan. And I believe the gentleman here to present that is Bob Summers from Scatliff, Murray, and Miller.
You got it.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Your Worship, Council, thank you very much for having me. It's been my pleasure to work with the committee that has been struck to pull all this together. It's a very exciting group of people who are all very engaged in this process. So I'm going to go kind of give an executive summary, high-level overview of the framework plan that has been developed. I'm assuming there's something to click ahead or just point. Oh.
Mr. Summers, it's your PDF, right? So you'll just have to scroll through. It's not a...
Right, yeah. It's just on the web. All right. Perfect. One at a time. Okay, so when we started this whole process, there's been a lot of great work done to date. There's been countless surveys, public surveys, public open houses, all these sorts of things that have happened. And we just wanted to get a grasp of sort of everything that has been done to date. So where we started with was actually the last official document, which was the sustainability plan from 2016, which kind of set a stage for the recreation master plan. And there were a number of sort of goals within that created sort of the aspirations of what the community is looking for. That is a sustainability plan, and we actually feel quite heavily that recreation and leisure becomes a significant part of that. So as you guys are all very aware, the preservation of green space while creating opportunities for outdoor recreation, the development of Crescent Lake and Island Park as natural community assets and protecting its ecological integrity, with exploring opportunities for ecotourism and recreation enjoyment. And it is a great asset that you have. That piece of land has been well used and is an incredible facility for the city. Establishing a community transportation network to provide alternatives to travel by car. There's definitely a very active transportation group that was committed to this committee that helped steer the direction of this as well. I'll get into that in a bit. Design all-season recreational opportunities. We're starting to see that everywhere. That we live in a four-season community here in Portage la Prairie, and that we are finding that everyone's getting a little bit more heartfelt about actually even doing things in winter. So we want to provide those opportunities and make sure that we're not just a one-season recreation place. And to develop an asset management and service delivery system to achieve fiscal sustainability. This is not unique. Every municipality is going through this. It's just in varying degrees where they're at with things. So these are all very closely entwined with sort of how this project will leap forward. One of the things we found was that we needed to get our heads into figuring out what's here. So over the winter months, we start to establish with the committee just an inventory of what's there and starting to position sort of what those recreation facilities do for the community. So we've created 3 levels of servicing for these parks, with those being neighborhood, community, and regional. The names sort of suggest to themselves a little bit that the neighborhood is dealing with those people who are locally proximate to a park space. These are often places like play structures, picnic tables in natural settings. They're not high-impact sport-type facilities. They're very neighborly spaces where people get together. Community level is perhaps you start seeing people driving to these spaces and you start to collect at them. You start to see more unique features that are added to them, as well as indoor spaces. And then regional, really, Island Park has become sort of a regional destination in many ways, as well as many of the Rotary Public Park, these places that are bringing in sort of the sport organizations and really dealing with that organized sport component so that they become a destination for the greater community beyond the city of Portage la Prairie. And what we found with all this really is, there we go. This has come out quite fuzzy, but really what it is there's a great cross-section of neighborhood, community, and regional scale parks. The town of Portage la Prairie, the city of Portage la Prairie is fairly well served. the proportion of park space or recreation space from an indoor perspective is approximately 7% of the land area of Portage la Prairie. Usually, aspirationally, most communities are looking at that sort of 10% mark where you have new development and you want 10% allotted. So this is right in the range of where you see it. Not saying it's good, bad, or otherwise. It seems to be well represented. There's a few areas, like in the south central neighborhood, that seem to be perhaps lacking opportunities because a little less city spaces available to it. But there seems to be a good connection to other areas that could be even helped even further by active transportation. So as this committee started, there's already a number of initiatives that, this process has been about 6 months, 5 or 6 months, and there's already a number of things that are already starting to happen just based on having everyone talk at the table. So there was a number of recommendations. I believe there's about 12 or 13 altogether. One of which was this council had already approved funds to go towards North End Parks for upgrading the playgrounds. I believe it was about $170,000, $60,000 of which was going to a new play structure near the BDO Community Center, the heart of the community. And that is, I believe, underway. I just saw the tender go out for that just recently. The development overall recreation parks asset management strategy, that is underway. Your staff are already starting to develop that. I'd really strongly encourage that to keep going with other municipalities to start sharing information, because that's a very valuable tool so that people can see, compare costs really, and really be able to keep up. Inspect and upgrade all city playground equipment to CSA standards. Again, that's underway. I know Dave Green from your parks group there, he's right on top of that, armed with the inventory that we've done too. He's been adding quite a bit to the document. Expanding the Splash Island footprint and enhancing the leisure pool amenities at the site. Splash Island is limited for capacity based on just how much land area it's covering. So right now there is expansion happening. It's approximately a $250,000 investment just to expand the fence and create more space for people, so it's not as congested in there, and create a more enjoyable experience and be able to get a few more people in there. And also upgrading 2 hardball diamonds at Rotary Republic of Manitoba Park. There's, I believe, one is happening this year, with a second one to be happening next year. It's essentially $100,000 over the 2 years to upgrade those 2 facilities. So those are all moving right along. And then there's a number of other pieces here, which is to upgrade and or replace children's play equipment at Rotary Republic Park. It is a little dated in the equipment. The CSA standards are continually evolve, and it tends to be that you see most play structures are going to be in that sort of 20 to 30 year range before you start to see CSA standards start to change, whether it comes to materials, types of construction, or even things that might happen with fall zones around a play structure. So that seems to be right in the wheelhouse of over the next few years to be looking at that. There is a desire to develop a perimeter pathway and trail around Rotary Republic Park that will connect to the active transportation system, and that really is talking about a gravel-based pathway system around there, and really trying to provide a few more amenities to that space, because it's such a well-used sport facility, so that parents, when a parent might have one child playing soccer, the other child could also be on the playground. So really trying to provide some opportunities for recreation beyond just the organized sport component. The next 2 are a little bit more governance policy based. One is to review the governance model for the recreation park service delivery system. And that really is, there's a few items to that. Is one, there's some overlap that's happening between the different operators who are right now governing parks and open space in the community. And it's really just trying to look through that and to make sure we're reducing that overlap and enhancing the benefit of having a much more linear process. And then there's also reviewing Parks Bylaw 7283, just because it hasn't been reviewed in a long time, and just to make sure that it is still relevant and reflecting that current system, because there seems to be some challenges from within that. And then on top of that, there's also a policy of just making sure that we create a policy on public land dedication on new development. It is fairly typical for a lot of municipalities to take that cash in lieu of land, and there's a few challenges that have really been brought up through a lot of the public engagement done to date about certain areas that are lacking some of those public spaces and connections to each other. There's also, now within your economic development officer, to the idea of working with all the different stakeholders, because recreation and sport tourism isn't singly devoted to sport. It actually relates to all aspects of economic development, whether it's hotels and all these other things, even volunteer capacity. So really developing a recreation and tourism strategy that ties up with sort of the economic development strategy of the City of Winnipeg. City of Portage la Prairie. There's also the concept of exploring additional opportunities for development partners, landowners in the south central neighborhood, where there might be opportunities to create public access to different types of neighborhood type amenities, where it might be small seating areas on an urban environment or a small play structure, those sorts of things. Right now, there really isn't a lot of city land that is devoted to that. We do have Red River College that has a community or a neighborhood aspect there, but really trying to make sure that where there might be opportunities to keep it on the table. And then the last two are ones that I'll get into a little bit more depth on. One is to develop an active transportation plan and implementation strategy. What we've put forward here is sort of we've looked over what's existing, what is kind of aspirational, the 50-year goal, but really what is prioritized from that. And there's going to be a lot of detail that's going to be required through both public engagement and dealing more closely with the Active Transportation Committee. And then lastly, designate the land and identify priority opportunities to what we are calling in here the new Central Community Hub, which is the land immediately to the north of the BDO Center. Jumpy. So I'll just jump right into the active transportation framework. Right now, what we have for active transportation, east-west, it's a pretty good system. There's a number of areas where you can go east-west, one along the south side of the rail tracks, along Crescent Lake, but everywhere else there's a lot of fractured components, so your gaps are in the system. Now, where we really see it the most is, and this is common for any prairie town that has a rail line going through it, the rail line is often a barrier to these things. So if you look at the next image, we've identified just a few of what those barriers are. The barriers tend to be sort of the east-west running barriers of the rail line itself. We've shown Saskatchewan Avenue as a bit of a barrier, but that's also an opportunity, especially with some of the master planning that's been done on there already. The three sort of points along the rail line where there are existing crossings are sort of the opportunities to remove the pinch points, including the Tupper Bridge, which is I'm saying that now, but it's obviously a much longer term piece. And then there's also some challenges with obviously, Crescent Lake is a barrier to active transportation through most of the year, but also because the barrier of Portage la Prairie and the RM of Portage la Prairie creates some challenges in the southwest corner. So what we've developed is sort of a grid system of when streets are being renewed, when you might have opportunities to start engaging where you can find some of these solutions to filling the gaps where they might exist, including three what we call corridor studies, which is Saskatchewan Avenue, Tupper Avenue, and not really defined by land, but the completion of that Crescent Lake loop, which has all of these projects have potential multiple stakeholders, will take some time to get through, but we see that it's a continual process that could be of great significance to help close the system. And within that, there's sort of the different levels of transportation that we had within there. One is the multi-use pathways, which is great. It's a great community asset. It keeps people off the streets. There's less conflict based with these. They are they typically roughly about a 2.5 to 3.5 meter wide pathway. Asphalt is the ideal, but you can do them in granular. You have already a number of them, including the images that's here. And these are ideal for most aspects of active transportation because they engage the full age spectrum and ability. On-road facilities have significant challenges, not always easy to do in every case. They can start from anywhere from just painted lines on a roadway to complete separation from some of the examples that you can see here. And with that being said, significant range in pricing that can happen with these, but do provide opportunities to really make it a safer environment for cyclists. And lastly is the neighborhood greenways, and these can take form in many, many different ways. And this is really just integrating cyclists into traffic through signage, through different traffic calming initiatives, whether it's bump outs, whether it's roundabouts, all these other sorts of things that could be brought into the story. Excuse me. And then the last piece we have here, and I've already mentioned it a little bit, is the corridor study for both along Saskatchewan Avenue, along the Tupper Avenue Bridge at the bottom, and then that sort of the finalization of that loop on Crescent Lake. And like I said, those will take some time to get through because of the multiple stakeholders, but should be something, especially with an active transportation committee, they can really start to move forward. This trail priority map has really come through the committee, and this is sort of a filling the gap approach to things. So you can see sort of 4, 5 really bold red lines on that map, 2 of which are really trying to close up that north-south gap, because we don't have a lot of, we don't really have any connections connecting between the path that runs along the rail line and the Crescent Lake pathway system, and it would be really important. We've shown them right now, sort of running through both of your on-street facilities that go over the rail line, because they seem to be getting to that point is of significance, because that way you can actually create some safe crossings. We also have the east-west line. We've shown quite bold there that runs near the BDO center. Ideally, that line could even run just immediately south of the BDO center and create a sharing agreement like you have on the south side of the railway. To have it run along the rail yard might require fencing and those sorts of things, but it is able then to take it off of the pathway and create quite a safe environment. On the far right, we show that connection that just tramples over a lot of houses and buildings, but really we're not trying to define what that exact routing is just yet, but what we're saying is connecting the end of that east-west rail line pathway that you have to Rotary Republic Park, which then, as we mentioned earlier, has a trail system to it, and you can start to create loops from within, and those loops become integral parts to the active transportation system. And a lot of that focus really comes down to, we've talked a lot about it, the BDO Center is sort of, and the land around it becomes sort of a potential heart of that community just immediately to the north of the rail line. And it's a lot of land, as you can see from some of these images, that has really just kind of been leftover land, and the BDO Center itself is, it doesn't have sort of that civic pride to the building necessarily, and it has a lot of potential to do that. So we saw the opportunity of, there's already a new playground going onto this site. We know that also the small city building that is on that site is slated to come down over the next few years, and this presents an opportunity to really start expanding the front door of BDO Center out to the community a little bit more, and start to provide some amenity over these spaces that are already under the purview of the city. So what we've looked at here is the site is made up of, on the far east side, we have a skateboard park with some prefabricated skate park components on an asphalt surface, both of which are no longer really considered ideal. It's in a tougher situation from a maintenance point of view. Just immediately off the Tupper Street Bridge, we have what we'll put in quotes a toboggan slide hill that's on there, not necessarily the safest space for that activity. we have sort of, as we move to the west, the front door of the BDO Center is not as exciting of a civic entry space, and it's a little confusing how traffic may or may not move through there. And then we move into the collection of kind of unused parking areas, except when hockey's really kicking in, and going all the way up to Fifth Avenue Northwest, which really, the idea with this this park infrastructure is to really create the BDO Center for the community as a community central hub in this neighborhood that brings the community together and provides some of those more independent play types of opportunities, building on modernizing the skateboard park and looking at other opportunities for all-season use. So the overall Central Community Hub has a fully accessible playground. It has a water-based playground, a naturalized bioswale to deal with sort of subsurface drainage coming off of all these pieces, a winter toboggan hill and snowboard skills hill that can feed themselves into both summer use as mountain bike trails or also tie into the south, the skateboard park and plaza. We're opportunistically feeding community garden boxes, which came up through all the committee meetings, kept talking about making sure that that's a component, because there seems to be a strong desire and almost waiting list of people for those facilities. Developing a walking loop that, with the right amount of volunteer effort or whatever it might be able to be iced over and create a skating loop, whether it's just for a weekend or for an all-winter use. Up at the northern end, a rain shelter park pavilion that could double as a space for picnics and other types of events. Creating that pedestrianized plaza space in front of the BDO and really trying to make that a space for people to be cycling to and leaving their bike there, but also just a place that you can mill about in the front of the building and actually have a very logical entry space to the building. And also making sure that we're managing this sort of the same amount of public parking in the area. So you can see from this next image, this is sort of the overall view. We're looking just from the southwest, high above, looking at the space. This shows essentially just trying to how we're trying to define 4th Avenue as a new entryway. Right now, primarily, it's a gravel surface road coming from the west to the east, but really trying to showcase that as one of the entry roads that would be a safe for use space, and really trying to define sort of where cyclists can move down, but also where parking can be, and really trying to add a little bit more legibility to the space that perhaps is best known by the locals, but if anyone's coming here for a hockey game or whatnot, might not be able to find as easily. But I'll slowly get into sort of the details of the park as we move into it. So at the north end, we're suggesting a small picnic shelter, park pavilion space that can almost become an iconographic gateway to the park from the north, so that this can become almost a community billboard. It can be a space where you can be doing movies in the park, small concerts. It's really not considered a large-scale assembly space. It's probably, if you had a small band playing there on a special community event day, you'd have about 150 people that kind of would fit around that comfortably. And that essentially just doubles as a passive space where the community can gather. The accessible playground, like I mentioned, already moving forward. This will be the first fully accessible playground in Portage la Prairie, which is great as our world moves forward. It's much more important to make sure everyone's accommodated in these things. So this would be primarily either rubber surfaced or there's engineered bark type products that can be used for surfacing, so that's all slowly being worked out right now. But this is taking place, again, moving from north to south, just south of the picnic shelter at the north end. We show here a water-based playground. This has come up repeatedly in consultation, that the concept of a spray park is of importance. I know that there's some up or down whether or not we should be. There's a lot of play value in this that the community is obviously seeing and really wants to take part in. Strongly encourage that as it would move forward through design, that this piece could become something that has multi-functions to it. It doesn't have to be a single-purpose facility, but definitely that idea of having some relief from the summer. What has happened recently is there's legislation moving forward to make sure that as you build a spray park, you must have a washroom facility, and that will be coming forward. There's going to be no grandfathering for it. It's going to be something that will have to be upgraded. So there's a number of communities that are dealing with this. There's possible connections in some way to the BDO Center that might be able to offset that, but it's really a little too early to tell exactly how that might play out. This image here shows sort of how that 250-meter walking, running, skating type of trail could meander around the park and can move up and down. What we're trying to show here through this whole design is that you want to be, through the construction process, you want to be opportunistic. If we're going to be digging out areas, as you would imagine that we would, where we have potential for fill, that we can build a high spot that can be a lookout, help with passive surveillance over the park, and that also becomes something that track can actually take us out of our prairie mindset a little bit and move up or down 2 or 3 feet and really start to realize that we can have a little bit more excitement in the way we move around things. And what that would become is essentially also a toboggan and mountain bike hill where we're all constantly trying to find sort of multiple uses for everything to make sure that we're optimizing the value of everything here, while also looking at how this park is really based on trying to create spaces for independent play, and that is really evidence here where that hill starts to become a snowboard park to the south-facing direction as it goes into the skateboard park, taking advantage of handrails and stairs and those sorts of things. It's not going to be necessarily a destination snowboard park to people who might go to Assisipi, but it's going to be a place where kids are able to practice sort of their snowboard skills before they go to those spaces. And alternately on the north face would be the opportunity for a toboggan hill, which would then be able to go right down into that bioswale area to help contain the kids tobogganing so they're not flying out to, although it's quite a ways away, to Fifth Avenue. And then what's proposed is a skateboard park. Sort of there's 2 phases of that, one being that one that ties into the snowboard park component, and then as it moves to the east, sort of a much more of a plaza space. So this could be done on a phased type of a structure. In fact, most of the items that are shown here can sort of be done in that manner. It just needs some future planning as you go along. But the skateboard park is essentially, when doing the research on the skateboard parks, it meets sort of a community-scaled skateboard park when it comes to square footage. This doubles as a place for kids on scooters, on BMX, and all those things, but also, if designed well, can become part of the general community as well, where we have found in multiple skateboard parks where seating for general users and our general visitors just spectating has become quite a thing, and really try to activate that front entrance and urban face of 4th Avenue, which is where we'd also tie in sort of these raised planter box community gardens. So you have that integration of all ages of the community and all levels of the community. And this is that view just down 4th Avenue on the north side of the street looking towards BDO. So it's trying to create that excitement and enthusiasm in front of BDO and really try to use that center as a point to build upon and expand into the community. And these couple images here just show you sort of how that pedestrian entry plaza can be done. It can be a raised kind of paving stone type of a space, so you really get the feel that you move through it and that it is pedestrian prioritized. It is pedestrian prioritized, but the bollards have been bumped over, fencing is down. And this is just an effort really to create almost a better neighbor situation in many ways, so that we have adequate buffering to the residents beside it and start to reduce some of that transportation going right through there. The order of magnitude budget that we've put forward to this is really at a high level. Really, this is probably at the top range of what it could be. Generally, a park of this size, about 1.5 acres, you would typically budget in the range of about $1 million an acre for sort of an urban park like this. So you can imagine that this could be anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5. But knowing that this is not, this presentation isn't coming as an ask to council saying, will you give $2.5 million to this? But it really is knowing that this is going to be part of a significant fundraising effort, that you might as well keep the dream a little bit bigger and be able to tailor design standards as you go through it to make sure you meet the ultimate goal. This has been broken down into a number of parts, which include all those things like site furniture, benches, waste receptacles, those sorts of things, lighting. And it's the idea is that each one of those items can be individual discrete items, as long as the sort of a construction staging pattern is managed, so that each one of those items, based on any prioritization that may come out of the community, the community can start to say what sort of their number ones, number two, number threes are, and it can start to build off of that, plus fundraising efforts that move forward, which I believe I explained in the next slide a little bit more. Yeah, it's just essentially saying sort of the next steps on that hub development, which is right in line with that. There is, I bring it up again just because it has been a point of conversation quite often about the concerns of a spray park, and it's really, it's difficult to say, yes, you need it, or no, you don't, because it really is just it's based on want more than need it in many ways. You look at communities. We're doing one right now in a community of 250 people, and then you see them in having a harder time in a city like city of Winnipeg right now, which are starting to look back. So it's hard to say that they're that it's a needed community amenity, but it is has been identified strongly by the community that they would love to see it, and it would just be strongly encouraged that that item has a number of different uses, because the window for operations on it is not a long window, because it's really just through the hot months. And so you want to make sure that either you build in other things like benching, small amphitheater type elements, or something to where it can actually add other areas to it. There's other types of water playgrounds that may be considered, but because the community's really come out strongly, this is definitely how we've moved forward, and we think it would be a great amenity for this space to really have a full complement of use for any family that might be coming to this park. So I'll leave it for questions.
Okay. Questions from council? Councillor Butts?
Not a question directly related to the report. The report is good. I'm just the next step. So what is the next step from the committee's perspective to come to council? I guess is the next step on here. I know that you've identified, hey, you got to figure out what you're doing. But so what is the next steps from the committee's perspective, I wonder?
If I could just jump in on my thoughts
Sure.
on that. I would say the number one thing is to. The reason I put the comment forward on the spray park is that if it is a political hot button, perhaps it shouldn't be shown. But I believe that taking this out to the community to see sort of what's been talked about, what this means, and start to get the community prioritization so they can go through those complement of items and say, if I was going to say we have limited funds and we think the top three things are these three things in order, and you may find that there's an overwhelming yay or nay to certain elements. We've done it on a few projects, and it really starts to it really defines things, and you start to see things go by the wayside just that aren't as important.
Other questions?
If I could answer Councillor Budd's question, we haven't heard from the Parks Committee for a little while, except for an update and a recommendation, I think, when we were discussing outdoor recreation in winter. The last time that they made an official presentation to council back in 2012, it was for the central hub to go forward for them to get continue to work with the city. At that time, I believe that the council made the decision to forego any spray park, water park feature there, and made it that it was not possible to go forward with that. I think you probably haven't seen an official ask from the Parks Committee because there's some confusion, I think, from the Parks Committee as to what we require from the city. What the Parks Committee requires from the city is an okay that this is an idea that we can continue with so that the Parks Committee can look at fundraising that. So whether the ask is that the Parks Committee comes back to council and specifically asks that here, or presents a letter, or if this approval would then allow them to go forward, some indication as to what's required for them.
Okay, so it sounds like we need to have some more dialogue with the Parks Committee. Other questions? Councillor Buds.
I'll ask a question, but it's not a precursor to anything that's happening. But this is a long-term investment in that area, and so we've talked a lot about the BDO Center forming a integral part of that. But what if the BDO Center and how we operate it today isn't what it is 5 years, 10 years from now? We don't know what's going to happen with that. And so there's another group that's technically running that facility right now. And has that been factored into in these discussions as to what if BDO isn't what it is today?
That certainly came up a number of times. I think the way that things have moved forward was this is public lands, and that right now this is a community space that even if BDO changes in some way, it might actually change based on some of these improvements to the park that have happened. I understand that the BDO Center, and we didn't really engage them all that deeply because we really focus on outdoor, but they have challenges, as every kind of community-based organization often has challenges. But we see this as a potential win-win where integrating into a larger site might be able to bring more people, more potential for economic spin-off, whatever that might be, whether it's opening small canteens, ice cream shops, who knows what could happen, or you could have leasable space in this, but somehow that that the BDO Center can benefit from this development as much as this development can benefit perhaps a little bit operationally from BDO.
Further questions? Councillor Draycott?
I'd just like to say thank you very much. I know that the time and the detail that your organization put into this was substantial, that you did have a lot of conversations with different individuals in the community, different groups within the community. You tried your best not to exclude anybody when looking at this. The community hub is a major portion of this, but a lot of information and was put into the active transportation portion of it as well, which I think is really beneficial. There were some things that through the meetings that I sat in on, I went, oh my goodness, I'd never thought of something like that. So I think that there's a lot of great ideas in this whole report. As we do often get reports, difficult to move forward without a budget line, but there is a group, an organization that is willing to work very hard and continue to work very hard on this, as they have for the last 5 years. So I think that's something that council needs to consider as well, is that this isn't necessarily an ask for a budget line, but an idea that another group can help you facilitate over many, many years to come. But good ideas for operations when they're looking at paths and walkways and sidewalks as well. Just things that, a good overview of what we have in the community and what would really make a lot of sense going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. You know what, it's one of those things, the committee was actually extremely, as you know, very enthusiastic and came into this with a lot of information. So it's sometimes hard to distill all of it, but it's definitely a great committee that's committed to seeing it forward, as you said.
I had just a couple questions for you. You said your estimates were on the high side?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
A couple of them look to be on the low side from what we had before. The estimate we had for, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, for the splash pad was a little bit over the $1 million mark. That was 2 years old, and part of that was washrooms. This includes washrooms?
Yes, yeah. I mean, the last few water parks that we've been involved with have all been direct-to-drain systems, which is sort of industry standard now. And those, you're usually seeing something at about 350,000, 300 to 400, somewhere in there. And washroom facilities, really what we're pricing out here is, because it's in a public situation, something that's a prefabricated concrete washroom that might have some architectural articulation to it, at a budget of, I think we had $250,000.
Take us to the 650 number.
So 400 for the spray park and the direct to drain, plus the 250 for the washrooms, kind of all in.
Okay.
We've done parks with washrooms and for well over $1 million, but I don't necessarily think that that's warranted in any way here.
Okay. Next question, kind of related. So you mentioned that community of 150 persons built a splash pad?
250. We're currently
250.
doing it, yeah.
So tell me about that, how they
Well,
do
one, it's in Ontario, and they don't have the washroom legislation yet, so that's not a concern. It's a fairly affluent community that's coming into some money, and that's where they've decided to put their money towards. So, yeah, it's... you know, we just actually worked with the town of St. Anne, which is also another smaller community, which also just built one. So they're happening in every community, and it really they're mostly driven just by the community demand, less so than you know, we've heard it from our community, and oftentimes there's just that sort of philanthropist in the town that helps them get to that spot, as is in the case of St. Anne and others.
Okay, so deep pockets would help.
Deep pockets help, yes.
Okay. When you did your study, did you take a look at Splash Island at all?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, part of a lot of ideas have been talked about, and you're right, this was a political hot potato a couple of years ago, absolutely.
Yeah.
The issue of transportation came up, you know, is there a way to, people from, that are far away from Splash Island, could they utilize it more if there was some form of transportation, or do you build something there? And I don't think, you know, there's been lots of discussions and dialogue, but I don't think, certainly no decisions have been made at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So, final question for you around active transportation. So, we've had a committee, and thank you for recognizing and worked very hard for the last 6-7 years. We've got some really good staff like Mr. Braden and Mr. Green that work with that committee. So, our vision is eventually all these paths are connected. Anybody in Portage can go safely from one area of town through some major arteries of traffic and a safe, safe-built infrastructure. You mentioned Saskatchewan Avenue as challenges and opportunities. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Just from, again, we didn't do a deep study into Saskatchewan Avenue, and I know there was already a master plan done for streetscaping along there. We understand that it is, and again, you're getting into political hot button there, I'm sure too. It's extremely wide because it used to be Highway number 1 running through town, and that there's opportunities now to start looking at how we can create sort of narrow the crossings a little bit through bump outs and other things, but also really it seems, without study, that there's an extra lane of traffic in there that really can be used for that sort of multi-use pathway long term, while still maintaining a level of parking. But also, what we've really found is, in many ways, it's creating those bike stations all along there so that all your businesses in town can start to take advantage of having people bike to their business. And if someone's biking to a business, they're often walking right along. So it's kind of using that as an opportunity for sort of the urban mall walker, right? So to be able to get people down to that, the kind of the economic hub of town and get people walking back and forth.
Okay. Well, as Councillor Draycott said, thank you so much for presenting to us this evening. I think you've given us a lot to think about, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Councillor Fraze, did you have anything further for committee?
No, that would conclude my report.
Okay, thank you. Waterworks Committee, Councillor Wall.
Yes, Your Worship, we have one item. At the next council meeting, we'll have an opportunity to approve a new standard for implementation within the city. We're looking at a new water service quality standard for the city of Portage la Prairie. In 2016, the city commenced a large project to convert its water meter systems to wireless Bluetooth. The long-term benefit of this is to reduce the amount of administration required to obtain water meter readings for buildings. So what's happening now is that a lot of the turn-ons, turn-offs, and activations are a shared responsibility between the finance and operations departments, where requests, account setup, and commitment to utility customers on when services will be completed and payments are processed by finance department employees, and the work required to attend to the city residences or businesses to complete these services is done by operations. The joint department delivery of water services is a new process, and need formalization to prevent misunderstandings between departments on completion, time, and service that the city offers. So the impact of this will be much improved service standard to our taxpayers. 90% of the time service will be provided within 1 business day, and 100% of the time within 2 business days. There will also be an option for premium service at a little extra charge. So I understand that the departments will need to communicate with each other. They'll do that using CityWorks, our new software, to produce work orders and to follow up, make sure the work is done on time. And the new standard is attached for your perusal. That's all I have to report.
Okay, any questions for Councillor Wall? Thank you. Transportation Committee, Councillor Draycott, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing on the agenda. However, I would like to remind everybody that the paving project is underway, so you can see lots of streets being ripped up and repaved as they go. Please be mindful to road closures. All of our pavement project is listed on the city website, as well as if you're connecting to the city on Facebook, they do let you know of road closures and such as they come up. So just a reminder to everybody to be cautious to workers, and yay for some new pavement.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Draycott. Public Safety Committee, is there anything tonight for Councillor Grace?
Nothing for Public Safety Committee, Your Honor.
Thank you. Now, just before we adjourn, for folks that haven't been here before, we have a question period. So anybody in our gallery, if you'd like to get up and ask council a question, you may do so. There's a microphone there, and we'll endeavor to answer your questions for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors. To whom do I apply for a permit for a restricted animal?
For a restricted animal?
Those applications are normally received by the Director of Public Safety, and they submitted council for approval.
Okay. Just to alert council, I would like to research and apply for a permission to have a beehive in my property. Under the bylaw, bees are determined as prohibited animals, and I would assume that before I do any research on apiarists or anything like that, I should put in an application to the Director of Public Safety. Is that RCMP?
Chief Carpenter, the fire chief.
Sorry, Chief.
Chief Carpenter, the fire chief.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
I'd just like to ask, in regards to the report that was presented, the recreation plan tonight, there is a part in the beginning which talks about establishing a community transportation network to provide alternatives to traveling by car. And the city has done very good work on the paths. What I would like to ask, if council has considered or will have discussion on going forward, PCRC several years ago did a very good plan on the need for bus transportation, public transportation. Council's 15-year sustainable development plan also identified that, and this plan has also touched on it. But this focus is much more on the active transportation aspect. So is council considering, or will they have conversation? And the last part of that is with Roquette developing, and that's a need for a number of employees working outside of town. So again, my question is, has council considered it, or will they have conversation about the need for public transportation or bus transportation?
Council has had conversations in the past, usually around budget time, and I would imagine we'll continue to have conversations in the future. Obviously, there's been no decision made to move ahead with public transportation other than handy van. There are other questions?
Council is considering the proposed sale of land south of the church, a bunch of acres, and on the understanding that council will install sewer, extend the road, sewer and water and so on. Is there an estimate on the cost of that?
There is. Sorry. Was there more to the question?
No. Is there an estimate on what we will have, the taxpayers will have to pay to service this place?
There is. What was the latest estimate?
I'll defer to Mr. Braden, please.
The preliminary estimate is in the order of $900,000 to $1 million.
And I'll ask Councillor Buds to just comment on the payback period based upon the estimated assessed value of the one new development that's committed to the area.
Yeah, I think that it's premature to kind of finalize a cost, as we heard Director Braden there estimate a cost. Those items and how that's actually going to be serviced is still yet to be determined. Obviously, there's a tight timeline here, but we're not considering also the sale of the service lots in that figure, so it's not net that amount. And estimated tax recovery of that amount is in the $200,000 plus per year in tax revenues off that property. So. The payback is shorter term in nature when the sale of the service lots and taxation is considered.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Lots. The provincial government has stated that there will be a bunch of money that is normally put to, or has been put to municipalities which will not be available. I note that there are proposals in the budget and going forward in the next few years for shared costs from the provincial government and things that are dependent on that. If the provincial government is correct and there's no money coming, what priorities have you changed and looked at as a council?
Well, I think I understood the question. The province has assured us they will continue to partner with us. I think the reality is that we're not going to see any increases. The province and the Premier has told us that we shouldn't be seeing decreases in funding. What that really means when you factor in inflation is actually there is a decrease in terms of the services that we can purchase with the provincial money. But we don't see a decrease. At least that's what the province has committed to us. Councillor Buds?
I can just add that obviously when we do our planning, there are projects where we do look to partner with the provincial and federal government. So if there are situations that we learn of funding that we thought may have been available or through a grant writing process that is not available in the future, obviously we'll have to revisit them. And Council has not prioritized those because we've given no indication that for what we've applied for in the near term has anything that's kind of in jeopardy for funding. But yes, we would have to realign priorities, and that hasn't been determined.
Further questions?
In today's information on the consolidated revenue, the amount going forward to the audit, it mentions that in 2016, $10.3 million was raised in taxes, and the school board needed and used and raised $7.6 million. There's a little emphasis, at least hasn't been in my view, on the school board. However, I think council has done a marvelous job of keeping taxes low and keeping increases basic. Would councillors consider next year running for the school board?
I can say no.
I think we'll find out who's running. And some of those positions are filled but through acclamation. So it's hard to get people to commit to that office sometimes. Other questions? Well, not seeing any, we will adjourn committee at 7:24 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for coming out, and thank you for sticking with us.